As promised, this is the spoiler discussion for The Running Man. If for any reason you are fearful of spoilers, you should immediately stop listening to this podcast, but look in our feed and pull out and listen to the spoiler free review that Pete and I did last week. Because when I say spoiler, I mean we about to go deep, like 10,000 feet deep into The Running Man. Because of course, as it is with all things with PCU, everyone actually functionally works for Belle. And Belle has finally seen the movie. So we thought this would be a great time to have a full-throated conversation with Belle because Belle loved this movie, and the more time that passes, the more problems I have with it.
Now, granted, I love this movie on first watch, and my mom and I are going to go see it on Monday. So maybe my mind will change. We'll see.
I just prefer the antagonistic contrary version of you because besides the fact that it makes for a better podcast, it's actually more factually accurate to what my actual relationship with you is like.
Oh, don't worry, I'll be there.
I'll be there.
Yeah. So, The Running Man. It's been out now. It's out now for its full theatrical release. I have seen some reviews in a couple of different places. I think NPR. The reviews generally have been mixed. Now, I would say that's not entirely surprising because this is a remake of a cult film,
Yep.
which it kind of already is a difficult hill to climb to begin with. And even when you're successful, like Pete, like we talked about with the Total Recall remake, even when you're successful, you still have issues with fans who are so dedicated to the original that they refuse to come see the new one, and people who are so far removed from the time period of the original releases, they're like, "What the hell is this? I've seen something else that's very similar to this. That's more my generation." So, having said all that, my walkaway impression is that The Running Man is an uneven film that has good things and bad things about it. That I don't think the bad completely overshadows the good, but I think it raises a series of interesting questions about the decisions that were made and about how to use minority characters in film. I'll just put it to you like that. But first, Belle, what did you think of this movie off your first watch? Being the fact that I know you're not like a diehard Running Man fan the way Pete and I were, which if you want to hear our discussion about the original Running Man, you should check out our VHS Chronicles episode covering the Running Man, at which we did an extraordinarily long deep dive. And I should note the movie's already received a recent 4K release, re-release. So great opportunity to go back and watch that. But Belle, your thoughts on this 2025 remake of the Running Man?
I surprisingly enjoyed it a great deal. Is it a perfect film? No. There are things that we will get into that I was like, that could have been better. That could have been better planned. But behind Sinners, and this is in the year where I saw Fantastic Four and Superman and so many other movies this year. And behind Sinners, this is my favorite film, my second favorite film of the year. Not that I didn't enjoy those other ones. Well, I did not enjoy Superman, but not that I didn't enjoy the other films. For whatever reason, this connected to me, not on the same level. I don't think anything is connected to me the way Sinners did, my God. But I think it tapped into my very specific frustrations with where the world is right now. And this film really tapped into conversations that I've been having with other members of our staff and with friends about the role that media plays and media literacy and AI. It tapped into those things on a very visceral level while giving me amazing action sequences and set pieces that it spoke to me in a way I really wasn't expecting. As much as I love Edgar Wright, and anyone who knows me knows that I love Edgar Wright. When I saw that he was remaking this specific movie and that Glen Powell was the lead, I was like, oof, I don't know, man. I don't know. So off of first blush, yeah, it tapped into that anger I really enjoyed it.
Sorry. Pete, is there anything in terms of general themes about the movie that you didn't talk about on the spoiler free that you want to raise now?
So you brought up an interesting point when it comes to, this movie being different from the original movie. And of course, it's tricky to even think of it like, to me, it's the original movie because, I think of it as, I think, the original story because I saw the movie first long before, I read the book. And then, of course, it's been so long since I read the book that I haven't really, I barely remember that. But the movie is still so vivid, and yet it's such a, like, even more than The Shining, the changes from book to movie were so deep that it exists in this really weird world where we remember the movie so vividly, and the movie is such a big departure from the book, and that you had now have this Running Man that is much more true to the book, and it still doesn't feel right. It still feels off, because of that. And I feel like I constantly throughout the movie I was trying to, reconcile that in my brain, uh, because it definitely has a very different feeling. Like there was the comedy was so over the top, in the Schwarzenegger film, and in this, maybe it's that there's a lot of realism to it, a lot of things that feel very connected to the world we're in now. And I think part of that's because of the book. Like a lot of the things that happened in the movie that I'm like, oh, this makes perfect sense because we have AI, and we can, manipulate video to the point that, we make something seem like it's real, but it really isn't. Just tracking people in general. But the book really incorporated all of those things. So that realism just makes it feel like it's not trying to be gritty or it's trying to be grim. I mean, maybe it is, but I feel like just grounding it in that world and how good King was at speculating on where technology would be and how it would work, I think make it a more serious film. And it's tricky because it's like this is a really serious film, and yet it's called The Running Man. Uh, and and at the same time, I think that you're right. Like the longer it's been since we saw the movie, it also occurs to me that this film, for all of that, still pulls punches because the truth of the matter is the book ends with him flying that plane into the building. He dies. Killian died, and everyone died. Like it basically is this like, well, I've got nothing left to go back to. I'm doomed. This plan of mine didn't work, and I'm going to take and the film. Maybe it's a Watchmen kind of thing where it's like, well, everyone's familiar enough with this ending that like, how do we do the ending so faithfully and still make it work? Let's do it. Let's pivot and still try to make it relevant. So I think the idea that okay, well, they were they had anticipated, that the plane could be flown to the building, and so that's not going to work. And how are we going to do this? Maybe maybe that was a smart thing to do, but it felt like it was pulling punches in a lot of different places. For example, with his wife, with Jamie, like or with Sheila, she is in the book like she is a sex worker. She isn't a bottle service woman. She isn't, like, oh, I know how it is in the club, but I'm not like that. Like to not feature that reality, to sort of soften that, seems like, oh, we just don't want to have that conversation. It feels like Running Man, in a way, the people who were behind this film wanted to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted it to be gritty enough that you're like, oh, that was really something, and yet didn't want to address genuine issues. You all the way down to the fact that what you have is a white, a the white guy that we that's in every movie right now, to be just like it has been for freaking generations, the stand-in for people of color, for black people in particular. Like
Oh,
he's that's who he is.
no, and I'm glad that you raised that because I was going to save this for later in the podcast. But seeing how you've teed it up so perfectly, I might as well dive
Yo,
right into it. The reason why this movie could never be perceived as being anything that is great or anything that's outstanding is because it constantly pulls its punches. This is a perfectly modulated movie for an environment where you don't want to offend one demographic and you don't want to offend another. So you make a series of weak decisions that weaken it overall. Now, I'll just say, in general, my first and foremost thought was it was like they said, there's no way Ben Richards could be a minority and that white audiences will relate to him at all. So he needs to be white because he's the heroic figure, and that's just the way that it needs to work. So
Mhm.
you know, and but it's the and I'm fine with that. It's the way that black people are used as props to justify his character arc the whole movie because it's
Starting with
all
his wife.
well, starting with his wife, but starting with really for me was one of the premier tropes, the magic Negro. The sympathetic Negro who risks life and limb for reasons that never really become entirely clear to help him survive and escape. And oh, by the way, has no problem with his kid brother almost getting murdered doing the same fucking thing. Did you know if there's anything you can count for in life as a white person, if you're fighting for good, there are Negroes who will die for you. That's literally how it came out. And now, when I say it's perfectly modulated, they consciously I felt like, okay, we're going to offend the woke progressives if these black characters die. So despite the fact that the car gets shot up in ways that are completely unimaginable, and somebody should have died, no black people are going to die in the filming of this movie. There'll be threats of death. There'll be simulated versions of death for people of color. But in reality, all the black people survive because they're all window dressing. Because otherwise, Ben Richards is just a really angry, pissed off white guy who's been manipulated by society, who's just ass out. And then at that point, I'm like,
First time.
I'm like, to have an all white cast. And I'm like, hey, I know lots of disaffected, betrayed white men who feel like the economy and the country have left them behind. You don't have to put a whole bunch of Negroes up there. And then on top of that, it's the going back to the source material where it's you know that Ben Richards was dropping the N word left and right. You know that he talks about Killian, who these filmmakers for the 2025 version decided to split Killian basically into two characters. So we have Coleman Domingo's Bobby Thompson, which has got to be one of the least inspired names of all time, but I digress. And then you have Josh Brolin playing Killian. In the book, Ben Richards' first response basically about what the man looks like. It looks like he walked out something out of a minstrel show. So race was a huge issue in this movie. And to before anyone says I'm being unfair, and they cribbed a lot of this from the first Running Man movie because Schwarzenegger's character was basically all about self-survival until his black friend got killed. And then he was down for the cause. I was like, oh no,
Oh,
you killed you killed my one Negro friend who risked his life for me. Cause that Negro believed in something. I believe in something now. So it's and I just could not get past any of that. Literally, the more time that's gone by since I've seen this movie, the more that thought process has just played out for me. And lastly, I'm gonna be really honest. If you get an actress like Jamie Lawson and you have the opportunity to cast her in the movie, this seems like this was a movie that was focus tested to death. That I really, honest to God, Pete,
Look, if
if you and I hit the lottery, I would make a documentary on the behind the scenes process of the making of this movie
right,
as like a microcosm of everything that's wrong with Hollywood. Because I'm like, you know what? You could have had a really great movie that was willing to make political points and was willing to offend people, which the original was damn near like some Paul Verhoeven, you know, criticism and commentary on American society and capitalism. But instead of doing all that, you kind of, we had some fun moments. They make fun of the Kardashians the whole movie, and I'm not gonna lie, like I didn't enjoy every last moment of that. And there's some good stuff in there. So I don't want to bash all of it, but and Bill, I want to hear your thoughts on this next. But I did feel like it was a movie where they could not figure out how to handle race, and they were all over the place the whole movie as a consequence.
it felt like I was watching the race draft sketch in my head of like, okay, what what are we doing for the white folks? This. What are we doing for black folks? What are we doing for non-black people of color? What do we got? Who's got something? What can you throw out there? We can make a reference to ice. Good. All right, let's work on that. Uh,
Now, I will say this in their defense. I do think that this is one of the first movies that I've seen where you have a white male character as the father of a biracial child, and he fights for that child the way you they would fight for, like, a white kid, or if it was a black dad in the movie. So I did think that that was that was surprising. I thought that was cool. So I will say, because I don't want anybody to be like, oh, he just bashed the shit the whole way through. No, I think that they deserve a point of view for that too. Belle, I'm sure you've disagreed in lots of different ways with what I've said, and now I'm interested to hear how you think.
Okay, so a few things. One of the things that did stand out to me was that Jamie Loss's character is very idealized. Anytime we see her on screen,
Mm.
she was extremely idealized to the point of sainthood. And that was a thing that kept striking me because I'm like, I know that this character has more layers than that because I read the book, to your point. So you don't, there is, you can do more than that. One of my biggest things that I didn't like about this movie is that you have so many interesting characters that are introduced, and we don't get to spend enough time with them because Michael Cera's character is completely unhinged, and I want to know more. I want to know how his character met the two characters
Yes, I
that,
need. I want
yeah, I need
background.
to know that backstory. I want to know more about how his character ended up meeting the two other young men and what was going on there. How did these three end up basically creating the Underground Railroad of the society for people who are in the Running Man, um, or to get the truth out about the Running Man? But every black character in the film is a very idealized version. So you have the strong black mother who is trying very hard not to do anything to cross a line, but also she's fighting for her man and her kid. Um, and that's not taking away from anybody's acting because there's that scene where he calls her to tell her that he's on the show. And in one line, she conveys that she thinks she's never going to see him again. Jamie Lawson's face, the
Hmm.
hesitation she takes, her eyes, everything in it is she's saying goodbye to him because as far as she's concerned, he is dead. And wonderful acting by her. Same thing with the two young men who help him. They're an idolized version of the concept, what was written in the original book about them being gang members, and what idolized version of hackers today, like groups like Anonymous. And so, yeah, they're quote unquote gang members, but they're really heroes with a heart of gold. They're unsung heroes. Coleman Domingo's character was interesting for me because he is, for all intents and purposes, the one really running the show. Killian is running the show, but he's making the deals. But Coleman Domingo's character has all of these people in the palm of his hands. He could ruin, as we saw in the movie, all of this with a few words. And so I thought that was really interesting with that character, and that's why they split them up to kind of balance the power dynamics of Killian versus Ben versus the media spin. And I thought that was a really interesting way to go about it. I do think that this is one of those situations where not having writers of color comes in play, whose voice would help you to then rewrite that character, especially when you're the one writing the script. That is a problem. And that is a problem, unfortunately, too many male directors, male writers fall into over and over again, no matter how good intention they are. That is a unfortunate thing. And that would be my biggest critique of the movie is I love all of the actors they cast. Every single one of them was amazing. They did great with what they had. They had mad chemistry with Glen Powell. But if you're going to cast characters, if you're going to cast actors of color in these parts, then you have to have someone on your staff who is going to help you make sure you get that tone right. And a prime example of that, speaking that we talked about earlier with Watchmen, is the Watchmen TV series versus Watchmen movie.
Mm-hmm.
Even though Damon Lindelof was the main writer on that show, he consulted with Regina King. He consulted with the other Black and brown writers on his staff when he wrote these characters. It is why Watchmen handles race and ethnicity and culture so well in a way that most shows not written by a person of color don't work.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree with any of that. A lot of it is about embracing what's in the story, right? I mean, the Watchmen TV series works because having listened to the actual official podcast, Damon Lindelof said that he saw Black Panther and his first thought was, well, if there was ever a place that was like Wakanda, white people would have destroyed it. And then he found out about Tulsa, which he had never heard of before. So that's a writer at the very beginning saying, I want to cover this issue, but I may not be aware of all the sensitivities that are involved. And so therefore I should strategically work with people of color as I'm crafting the story where their characters are really significant toward moving the plot. I think the problem with The Running Man is the fact that that's not there. What's there instead is this need to say, we want to tick off the boxes that we can to not offend Black audiences. We want to tick off the boxes we can to not be perceived as being too woke. But we really, to your point, and really this isn't even just about the actors of the actors of color. Every single actor in this movie is underused, besides Glen Powell, who I would tell you, I would talk to them about if I was him, I'd be like, yo, man, why was the second half of the script so much better for me dialogue wise than the entire first half? Because I told Pete the first 30 minutes of his dialogue, I was like, if this motherfucker dies, I don't care.
Yep.
It means nothing.
It's all exposition.
Yet the last half of the movie is rushed.
The last half of the movie is rushed, but at least in the in-between part, I have really started to enjoy this character. Like, he's like, because first we just get pure rage. Then we get to that sweet spot after he has his moment with the young lady who has cancer. And he's kind of like, okay, I'm really getting to a place where this isn't just about me surviving for my family anymore. This is if I gotta do all this, there are certain things that I want to put out there. And I feel like all those things, and so whether it's Josh Brolin, whether it's William F. Macy, across the board, I think every actor could have been used in a better way and was not. H. Macy, sorry. And I think at the end of the day, I think that's the thing. Don't get me wrong. This is not a bad movie. Please don't anybody walk away with the impression that I'm saying this is a bad movie. I have seen much more problematic movies than this that I have found ways to enjoy. I just think in some strange ways, Pete, you raised it earlier about them pulling their punches. They pulled punches that they weren't afraid to throw in the Schwarzenegger movie, which is why I'm always kind of left with when people talk about things being woke. I'm like, it was a big thing in the original Running Man that it was kind of like, gee, it wasn't yelled out, but it was kind of made clear there are no people of color who work for Damien. There were no Black people who weren't in camps. The guys who were running the gambling were two Latino brothers. Like they were willing to make decisions around casting and how they use those characters where they weren't bludgeoning you over the head with the politics, but they were making it very clear that the Running Man was a action movie that was unafraid to discuss fascism and media manipulation for the purposes of giving bread and circus to the masses to distract them from what was going on. And I feel like there were lots of different ways that they did that. And I feel like the Running Man had the opportunity, if it had been willing to take more risks, and if it had been willing, to be perfectly honest, to be more willing to offend people, then I think that they would have gotten there. And my last statement before I give it to Belle is, other filmmakers have no problem with just saying, I'm going to end up offending one part of my audience and I'm okay with it. Because for me, I go back to the Joker movie. There isn't a person of color I know who saw that movie who thought it was okay. And that was a media darling movie. that so many people were willing to embrace. And every person of color I knew said the same thing. He ain't do nothing besides Robert De Niro. Everybody else he killed was brown. Was brown. Well, I don't know how. So when you're a filmmaker and you pull your punches, you end up with something that's less than. Especially when you're adapting problematic, racially problematic source material, and you're trying to bring it into 2025 in a way that's responsive to the politics and the culture and the time period that we're in. Um, what does the Bible say about a lukewarm man? If you sit in the middle of the fence, you're useless, and that's why I'm like the Running Man is a. I think originally I gave it 8 out of 10. Now I'd probably say it would be more of a 7. Maybe under a bad sort of circumstances, 6 out of 10. It's not a bad movie. It's not a bad movie at all, and I love the cast. I would literally, you could give me that entire cast back and something else, and I would show up.
The fourth Knives Out movie. I'd watch that with that cast.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, it's a couple of things that you said that I want to touch on. So I'm going to try to make this quick. So going to what you were saying about how they seem hemmed in, that's two things I can tell you to that. Of all things, Ron and I were watching Head of the Class. I don't know if you guys even remember that show with Howard Hessman. And um, and I was looking at the cast, and I thought this would be considered woke now.
Mm-hmm.
3 of the main characters are Black women. One person is disabled. 2 are Asian descent in both East and South Asian. There's maybe 3 whole white guys on the show, and one of them is a giant nerd, and the other one is a bit on the heavy side. The only conventionally attractive one is the one that's the least liked of the bunch. That would be considered woke. Now, we are less free now than we were when we were growing up in terms of media. That's why things like Sinners does seem like it's revolutionary, because we're having less real conversations now, and that is unfortunately a post superhero film problem. As a post superhero rise of reality television issue, because people think that they're getting reality on reality television, and so that's their version of reality when it's edited, highly edited, which goes to the film. So that's the first thing. Other thing, the reason they're hemmed in is the reason that I knew they were going to be hemmed in, and that is because, without fail, the movie that Edgar Wright releases in the theaters and the movie that comes out on the director's cut are 2 completely different fucking movies every time. Go back and watch Scott Pilgrim versus the World, a theatrical release versus director's cut. For whatever reason, Edgar Wright films do not, what he ends up releasing for the theatrical release is okay. It's good. Usually it's very good, but it's not, oh my God, that was a banger, like the actual director's cut. So I don't know if that's him. I don't know. I don't know if it's studios or what. I just know that tends to be the case with his work. Lastly, I want to kind of stir it back to the performances. I made a point of saying that all the actors were great. I went into this, anyone who's listened to our previous talking about this specific film, in no way really interested, because the first film is a beloved cult classic for me, and Glen Powell's everywhere, and I don't get it. I genuinely didn't get it. His performance in this movie finally made me go, oh, I get it now. I get it now. Because one of the things that you said was how you never knew anybody could embody such level of rage when I was listening to you guys do the spoiler free, that you've never seen an actor physically embody rage the way Glen Powell did in this movie. And I kept going back to the closest version I've seen, which was Falling Down with Michael Douglas. I don't know if you guys remember that movie. And I feel like the difference was, in Falling Down, he is just angry. He's just filled with rage, and he has a good reason to be. But there's no vulnerability, at least in my opinion. And Glen Powell managed to, even at his most absolutely, I'm ready to murder everyone in this room moments of rage, he still manages to add a vulnerability to this character and layers of genuine fear that I did not, and hysteria at his increasingly insane circumstances that I did not think he was capable of doing. So, if for no other reason, go see the movie, because Glen Powell, if you're like me who was like, Glen Powell, no. His performance here makes suddenly the last 3 years of Glen Powell getting shoved down my throat make sense.
Mm-hmm.
I actually don't have a response to that. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I don't think there's anything else we can add that we haven't already said. I think the original out of the two is superior. That I make no apologies about. This is a good movie. Now, where I would rank it on the Schwarzenegger '80s movie remake list is it's definitely coming up second to Total Recall, which to me is I have a big problem when I feel like you do a remake and you don't kind of address the flaws of the original. And I feel like that was what they and Pete, I said this on the spoiler free. The hunters were not entertaining.
No.
The hunters had no personality, and I'm fine.
This was wasted in this movie. Dead ass.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anybody underneath there, honestly.
and to be honest, if we had for all the problems that I have expounded upon ad nauseum on this podcast, if I had really great entertaining villains to look at, that would have addressed a lot of it because that's exactly how the first movie ended up being something that was it's Schwarzenegger. They gave him he had some of the worst dialogue of his career in that movie, but it's because they got really interesting people to play like really interesting different types of guys. You know, the guy who played Dynamo was an actual opera singer. You have Jim Brown, who was literally an NFL absolute legend. I can't remember the name of the professor. I think his screen name is Professor Tanaka, who plays Sub Zero. But he was a B-list iconic movie villain across multiple '80s movies. So, and then you had Buzzsaw, who basically looked like one of the most intimidating human beings that you could possibly see as like a 10-year-old kid. So the Hunters made the original movie that much more interesting. And the only great Hunter moment I got was when Glen Powell's Ben Richards throws the grenade. Like, and the guy's like, right back at you. That was the moment in the trailers that I was like, I want to go see this movie because that's what I want to see. I want to see heroes like, take this and like, yeah, no, son. I've been doing this for a while now. So this whole moment you're having, you think you're doing something? Nah, I didn't kill somebody who pulled the same ish last episode. So you ain't special. And I feel like not having that and like, and there was a lack. And I'll say this is my absolute last statement. The reason why I like the original is in part because of the interactions between Schwarzenegger and Richard Dawson. I feel like they had a wonderful antagonistic chemistry against each other that Richard Dawson, I think, played that character as well as any human being. I couldn't imagine anybody else playing that role but him. And I feel like there was a potential for that with Josh Brolin and Glen Powell. And I think that putting in Bobby Thompson as a character diminished that. And it left me with a movie where I've got a hero who's angry and pissed off for all the right reasons. And he's up against a faceless, personality-less series of villains, with the exception of Killian, who's entertaining as hell for the little bit of the movie that he's actually in. And so I'll say, for any action movie, unless it's like The Crow, and the hero is the most compelling, most interesting character in the movie, if the villain ain't great, you're gonna have problems. And I do feel like the lack of a really great, memorable villain, it does make a big difference. But for all I know, Bell, to your point, we're gonna get the director's cut, and I'm gonna see like 3 other hunters that I didn't even know were in the movie, and I'm like, oh, this shit is dope. So that could happen too. So well, this has been PCU's spoiler review of The Running Man. I would, of course, encourage you to A, like, listen, and subscribe. B, if you like a whole bunch of Running Man stuff, you should listen to the VHS Chronicles episode that Pete and I did. And C, you should be on the lookout for future conversations about Schwarzenegger remakes. I can guarantee you, with the way that Hollywood is right now, where everything has to be focus tested, and we need to be able to explain what the quarter three monetary results are going to be. They're going to keep remaking Schwarzenegger movies from the '80s until they run out. So join us next month for the 6th day. I bet y'all forgot about that one, or maybe the Eraser remake. That could be fun.
The last action hero.
Okay, real talk. If I was gonna do a Schwarzenegger remake of any movie that hasn't been done yet, you know what I would think about doing? End of Days. That was much better with Gabriel Byrne playing the devil. That was a much better Schwarzenegger movie than I expected it to be. But I digress. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Keep running out there. Don't let them catch you. Talk to you next time.